I think we'll make a start on our program for today. So again, I'd like to welcome you all to the second day of the virtual training on the Global Database for Protected Areas Management Effectiveness. Good to have you all on board and tuning in virtually from wherever you are across the region and internationally. Thank you for availing your time to joining us for this important online virtual event. Without further delay, I think we will commence with the program for day two. Just a couple of notes that we had. And also like to welcome those who have just joined us today. Happy to have you with us as well. So just a couple of points before we move on to the program proper. We did have some requests yesterday from a couple of participants for the recordings of yesterday's session, as well as a request for copies of the PowerPoints from yesterday. Just to make it easier for you, our team will be packaging the PowerPoints as well as the recordings for Zoom. And also there was a request for some of the links, the web links that were shared through the chat yesterday. So we will be packaging these in a folder, the recordings, because they're quite large. So we will be sharing these via links on the Google Drive, so you can access them because they're quite large. So we will be preparing this for you so that you have everything in one. Okay, as I said, a recap from yesterday. We started off yesterday as more of an informational campaign, and really just to give you some background and context to the global database, as well as protected area management effectiveness, what it is, and how it can benefit countries in terms of your national reporting, and why it's important to gather and consolidate and manage this data across the region. So we will be moving on to our program for today. We will have a couple of presentations in this morning session, but then we'll also have an interactive discussion towards the second half of the day. So we're going to start off the morning with a presentation from UNEP WCMC on Claire Vincent, and she'll be presenting on the current data for the region that is currently on the global database for protected area management effectiveness. So I'll turn it over to Claire now for her presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Vi. Great. Let me just set this up. Okay. So for those of you who were here yesterday, I gave an overview of the global database on protected area management effectiveness. And now I just want to go in a bit more detail with regards to the data that we currently have for the region. So just a reminder that all of this data is available on protectedplanet.net. From the home page, you can click on the top right-hand corner in the thematic areas and then select for PAME, management effectiveness. And then it takes you to the database page where you can filter for your country or for multiple countries and then download a CSV of the data. So currently in the GDPAME, we have assessment information for 66 protected areas that have been assessed from 8 countries in the region. And this covers assessments that were done using 6 different methodologies. So there was RAPAM used in Papua New Guinea, the National PAME assessment from Palau, the MET has been recorded in Fiji, Papua New Guinea, and Vanuatu. The World Heritage Outlook Report was submitted for Kiribati and the Solomon Islands. The BirdLife Important Bird Areas tool was used in Kiribati and Tonga. and the Gobi survey covered protected areas in the Federated States of Micronesia. So, as I was saying yesterday, the database is likely to be not complete. So there's likely to have been a lot more assessments that have been undertaken in the field that haven't worked their way up into the global database. But for now, this is the information that we currently have. And the data is quite old. So all of the data we have is from before 2014, with the majority of the assessments taking place in 2004. So that's more than 15 years ago now. So it's quite outdated. And then this is just a summary table of the current data that we have for all the countries in the region. So I start at the bottom of the table, the Cook Islands, Marshall Islands, Nauru, Niue, Samoa, and Tuvalu have no assessments currently in the Wdpa. So as I said, it's not necessarily true that no assessments have been done in those countries. It's just that the data hasn't come to our database. For the others, Papua New Guinea has 72% of their protected areas assessed. But the most recent assessment we have is from 2005. So a lot of that data is quite old, even though it does cover the most protected areas compared to the other countries in the region. You can see here too, I have a column for number of protected areas assessed, and then a column for number of assessments, and sometimes those aren't the same. So for Papua New Guinea, there are more assessments than there are protected areas that were assessed. In this case, there was one protected area that was assessed twice. So at different years, 2004 and then 2005. And that's why those numbers might not always add up. So you can take a look here at the country that you're most familiar with, see if this data makes sense, if you think it's a true reflection of the actual number of PAME assessments that have been conducted in your country, or if from your knowledge there are some gaps. And I would assume that there have been some assessments that have taken place since 2014. And I'm sure we will hear a little bit more about that from Paul's presentation a bit later. So it was much faster than I thought, but that's just a brief overview of the current situation of the data that we have in the Wdpa for the region. Yes, and happy to discuss this further and answer any questions that might come up.
Thank you, Claire. Did you want to take any questions now?
I can.
Well, I'll just throw it out to the colleagues. We have room for 3 questions. So if anybody has any questions at this point, you can either put your thumbs up and we will take your question at this point. Otherwise, we can put it in the chat and we can note it for the Q&A session.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. It looks like we don't have any questions at this point.
Good morning, Vi. I threw my hand up.
Nate, oh, sorry, Nate. Yeah, okay. Yeah, thank you. Over to you.
Yeah, thanks, mate. I wanted to ask the group, so I'm aware that Papua New Guinea has done management effectiveness assessment over the past few years. I think some of you on the call would know Fiona Leverington and her group. So who can I hassle to get that data uploaded? Because I know they've done it. So should I, because I know the people in PNG pretty well, I'd be glad to hassle some people up at SEPA to get that data uploaded. Would that be the right way to go?
Yes, that would be great. The one main thing that we need to think about is the data needs to be shared by those who own the data. So whoever did the assessment would need to share it. But yes, you're more than welcome to follow up with them and tell them maybe they don't even know about how this process works or the Wdpa. So it would be great.
Yeah, I helped them about a year ago to get their protected areas data updated in the Wdpa. So we got that far with them. And at about the same time, Fiona and her team did the Met work. And I know they did some reports and did some great documentation and stuff like that. I'll hassle those guys a little bit and see if I took a screenshot of this slide here. So I'll harass them today. Thanks.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you, Nate. Thank you for raising that important point. Is there anybody else? Any other questions? We have 2 more slots. Sorry, Claire, can you unshare your screen because I can't see if anybody's putting their finger up. I mean their thumb up. Sorry. Okay. Okay. It doesn't look like there's any, but I do have a question, please, because I noticed that on the PPAP right now we have 51 assessments noted for Papua New Guinea, but I note that you mentioned 42 on your current list. And I guess that just again points to the fact that there are gaps with the data that we need to address. Huh?
Yes, so we have 66 protected areas have been assessed. So we have a bit more. But it may be, but yeah, anyways, doesn't really matter who has more or who has less, they should be the same. So they should be aligned.
Okay, thank you, Claire. Okay, thank you for that. We'll be moving on with our program, but just before we move on to our next presenter, I'd like just to draw the attention of our participants to that we do have a participants list, and I'd be really grateful if you could fill that out. It's very basic information, just your name, your organization, email address, and so forth. And our colleague Paul from IUCN is sharing the link here on Google, on the Google Docs. Very easy to complete. But if for some reason you're having problems, just let us know through the chat, and we will be able to assist you with that. So I appreciate if you could all spare a minute or two to complete the participants list behind the scenes as we move on with our program. So our next presentation is from a colleague working with the European Commission Joint Research Center, or the Scientific and Research Wing of the European Commission, Bastian Bertsky, and he will be presenting on the PAMI module under the Biopharma Global Reference Information System. So over to you, Bastian. Thank you.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Hi, and thanks for giving me this opportunity to briefly introduce the PAMI module of the Biopharma Information System. I just put the link into the chat, but I will also show it in my slides. Let me just quickly go to my presentation. I will try a mix of slides and live demo, which usually goes wrong, but let me try. Can you all see this slide now?
Yes, perfect.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, let's get started. I will give you a quick introduction to the Biopharma Reference Information System. Very brief, really. Then introduce the PAMI module, why it is there, what it does, and for whom it is, and who can contribute. And then show you, hopefully live, how to navigate it and what you find in the different parts of the PAMI module. And then I will quickly introduce also the different ways in which you can contribute content to the system, and then close with a few take-home messages. So a quick recap, I think Paul last night introduced the BioPharma program, but for us at the global African, Caribbean, Pacific level, really there are 4 main pillars to the BioPharma program. And these are the regional observatories, which host regional reference information systems. And these things may have different names in different parts of the BioPharma regions. But for example, of course, in the Pacific, we have the Pacific Islands Protected Area Portal hosted at SPREP. And we, in our Joint Research Center of the European Commission, our team has been developing a reference information system that is also available to all the regions, and that I will quickly skim through the landing page in a second. But these are 2 core elements of the BioPharma program. And then, of course, there are the other 2 pillars, the capacity development component and also the action component, where we are funding actions. All I talk about today is really about the information systems, and the information on PAMI you find there at the ACP-wide level. And this touches also a little bit on the capacity development and potentially also has implications for actions implemented in the region. Quick look at the BioPharma Reference Information System landing page. The BioPharma Reference Information System takes a modular approach. We have various modules available, including for tracking conservation targets, sharing story maps, sharing spatial data, getting summary statistics in the protected area dashboard at country level and regional level. But what I want to look at today is the protected area management effectiveness module, the so-called PAMI module. So in a nutshell, what we are trying to do with the PAMI module is really to help anybody interested in and working on management effectiveness to have quick and easy access to key PAMI standards, tools, methodologies, assessments, best practices, and capacity development resources. We all know that protected areas need to be managed effectively to achieve their the objectives and outcomes for nature and people. And we are trying with this PAMI module within this BioPharma information infrastructure to support this vision. So really, the PAMI module is envisaged as a one-stop shop for essential information in the ACP countries on anything to do with PAMI. And there's still a lot of work to be done to achieve that, but I will show you in a minute what we have already and how easy it is to contribute. The PAMI module is really designed to support the BioPharma regional observatories and regional information systems, but also national ministries and agencies that are looking for information in this area, PA managers and the monitoring evaluation staff at protected and conserved areas, also donors, community-based organizations, NGOs involved in protected area governance and management, and potentially also these assessments of management effectiveness. And as I said before, actually the system is designed in a way that any registered user can add content, and we already have logins, of course, for IUCN, JRC, SPREP, UNIT.CMC probably as well. If not, we can certainly arrange that. I will try to switch to a live demo now. Let me just see if that works smoothly. Can you see the website now?
Yes.
Yes, perfect. Okay, so this is a landing page of the PAMI dashboard to which you get by clicking on this landing card on the, on the card on the landing page of the BioPharma RIS, also by just following the direct link that I shared before. Very simple structure. We have only 4 areas here. One deals with assessment tools and methodologies. I'll show that in a minute. We have an area dealing with the actual assessments, and that information is coming from Wdpa. And we display it in a slightly different way, but it's actually exactly the information that Claire was showing earlier. We also have a section where we are sharing PAMI documents and resources, and where you can also share documents and resources. And we have a section where we are sharing protected area management plans, because quite often they contain important information, such as the objectives of a protected area that you need to know about if you do a PAMI assessment. So let's go right into the first part here, into the assessment tools section. And what we have done here, we have created a list of key tools and framework standards, including the IUCN Green List of protected and conserved areas, the integrated management effectiveness tool developed by the BioPharma program, the management effectiveness tracking tool that many of you will be familiar with, also the RAPAM tool, and enhancing our heritage and other tools. And for each of these tools, I'm taking the example of the MET, for example, here, you find some very like short essential information, and then you have a series of links that take you to the respective manual and website where you can download that tool, or also to our map that I show in a minute, where you can see where in your region these assessments have been conducted. And so you don't need to go to any other place, really. Don't have to leave the BioPharma information system to get this information for these tools. And we can always add tools. And in fact, registered users can also add tools themselves that may be relevant in your region, but may not be known in other regions. And we have only started filling this with some of the most commonly used tools. Then moving on to the assessment assessments page, the next part. As I said, this is populated with information from Wdpa, and we have similar filters here that allow you to interact with the data. You can search for specific methodologies, years of assessment in different regions, countries, also whether an area is coastal, marine, and terrestrial and has had an assessment. For the Pacific, if we zoom into that region, we should also have a similar amount of records than Wdpa. We have some 61 entries here, and you can get a table view down here, and you can download that or print that to a PDF or get a spreadsheet from this. And you also have the map showing you which areas actually have had an assessment. If you zoom in, now I've zoomed into my screen. Sorry, that was not what I was intended to do. Go back. But you can see, for example, the areas in Papua New Guinea here, or the big marine protected area in Kiribati that has had this assessment there. And you can filter this data further using the different filter options and then download the data. And this isn't part of the website where you can't contribute, because our philosophy behind this is, if you have data to report, please go to Wdpa, which is maintained at UNIT-WCMC, and they will have to update the global data set. We don't want to duplicate efforts. We don't want to create a separate data set, but we are using the data that they make available to display it here in the system. Then I go into the resources part here, which actually has anything from websites to documents, assessment reports from individual assessments. Right here, the first record actually you see is the assessment of management effectiveness for the protected areas in PNG. We have also management publications, and initially this covers all of the ACP regions, but again, you can filter, for example, for resources dealing just with the Pacific region in BioPharma, and here the system should return in a second. Pretty slow tonight. Oh, sorry, I didn't. No, it should do it. Yeah, okay. It returns some scientific papers. It returns, again, the PNG assessment, but also the IUCN World Heritage Outlook assessments, the latest one from 2020 for the Phoenix Islands protected area in Kiribati, also Rock Island, Southern Lagoon in Palau, and East Rennell, Solomon Islands. So this again is an area where anybody who has a login can add content, and we have started to populate this with a few examples of things that could be relevant to share, but we would welcome contributions here from the regions and we have already in some of the other regions a lot more information present in the system. And then last but not least, we have this area with the management plans, where our intention is, again, to make available management plans so that others can learn from what exists already, but also check, if they have to do an assessment, what are the objectives of the area, what are the threats, what are the values of an area. And again, there are a few examples, not many, not an exhaustive list yet, but we have a few here for the Pacific where we have uploaded some available management plans and linked them to the respective protected areas in the system. So also, if you're coming into the BioPharma information system from, let's say, the protected area pages, you will find references to these management plans. And then you can download where available these management plans, or follow a link to the place on the web where these management plans have been originally published. I think I stop here with the live demo and quickly go back to my remaining slides. You can see the slides again. Sorry, I just need to do it again. Where am I? You can see the slides again? Sorry.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Good. So let me just close by saying, management plans, we had that. So if you have a login and anybody can request a login, you can add assessment tools. As I was explaining, you can add any type of PAMI related resource from the region. You can add also management plans to the system. And we would very much welcome these contributions. And only if you have to report PAMI assessments, then please go directly to the GD PAMI maintained at UNIT WCMC. I close by saying that, so remember, PAMI module is one of the many modules in the BioPAMA RIS. It allows you to query the GD PAMI data. That is the main topic of this whole training through the map interface, but also these various filters that I showed to you. Overall, the module is designed to provide easy access to useful PAMI resources. We encourage you to use it, to promote it, contribute, also give us feedback. If you think something's not working, something's not looking right, you struggle, we're happy also to give individual sessions if you want to get like a hands-on demo how to upload something. And I should also note that later this year, we will be launching a complementary module on protected area governance and equity, very much the same structure, very much the same content, where we're looking at governance assessments and equity-related assessments, social assessments for protected areas. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bastian, for that very informative presentation and for the great demonstration of the PAMI module of the Global Reference Information System. Again, I just would like to remind everybody that if you have any questions from the earlier presentation from Claire Vincent, as well as the presentation from Bastian that is completed, please put them in the chat so we can note them for the subsequent session on Q&A, which is coming up. And thank you again to the participants who have already completed or filled up your details on the participants list. Thank you very much for that. Okay, we will be moving along with our program, and we have one more presentation, and this is from Mr. Paul van Nimwegen of IUCN Oceania Regional Office, and he will be presenting on the State of Protected and Conserved Areas report, specifically on the management effectiveness chapter of that report for the region. So without further delay, I will pass it over to Paul. Thank you.
Thanks, Phi. Good morning, everybody. Also, thanks to Claire and Bastian for those interesting and excellent presentations. So I'll share my desktop now. Just bear with me as I do this. I'll get up the PowerPoint presentation. Can one of the team please confirm that you're able to see the PowerPoint slides?
Yep, all good.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. So as Vi mentioned, I'm just going to give a really quick presentation about the management effectiveness chapter of a report that we're preparing, which is called Conserving Our Sea of Islands, the State of Protected and Conserved Areas in Oceania. This is still in draft form, but we have the results for the PAMI chapter, so I'd like to share them with you today. Just a little bit of background about the report. The purpose of the report is to provide a comprehensive review of the status of protected and conserved areas in the region. It's funded through the BioPAMA project, and the partners that are on the call today are involved in its preparation. So obviously IUCN, where I'm from, SPREP, JRC, and WCMC are all contributing to this report. It's a partnership, it's a joint effort. The approach that we've taken is to bring together, there's over 20 regional international experts that are contributing to the report. There's a range of chapters. The management effectiveness chapter is just but one. The other chapters are coverage, connectivity, legislation and governance, management capacity, well-being and sustainable financing. So it's really about the status of protected areas, but we've also taken the opportunity to focus in on some of the more significant issues that affect protected areas in the region. As I said, it's in draft form. The draft manuscript is nearly complete. We're going to be sending it out to external review, hopefully soon. Concurrently with that, we want to send it out to each of the countries as well for feedback on the report and validation. We're looking to have it launched towards the later part of the year, so keep an eye out for that one. All right, so for the PAMA chapter, what we did was what we wanted to do, because it's a state of report, so what we wanted to do was to try and collect or identify all of the PAMA assessments that have been done within the region. We took a broader approach than just representing the data that's in GDPAMA. What we did was basically a comprehensive desktop review, which led us to pull the data from GDPAMA. There's a MET database and other sources, so we also contacted people directly and asked us to share that information. We drew a couple of, I guess, limitations on the data that we sourced. So the first one is that we drew a 10-year timeline. So the assessments that we represent in the report, in the chapter, are only for the last 10 years. And the other one that we restricted was the BirdLife IBA assessments. We felt like that they weren't comprehensive enough or to represent a PAMA assessment. I should also note that the authors of this chapter, it's not myself, but the authors of this chapter are Mark Hawkins, Professor Mark Hawkins, Dr. Fiona Leverington, and Lolita, who many of you will know from Palau Conservation Society. So they're the three authors of this chapter. I'm just, I guess, presenting the contents of the chapter. So this is the findings of that research. So what we found was that there are 833 protected areas in the region that we've recorded, and of those, 224 sites have been assessed with some sort of PAMA assessment. This constitutes 27% of the protected areas. You can see from the infographic on the screen that the level of assessments at the country levels vary greatly. You can see that, for example, there are countries like FSM, Niue, that have completed assessments on 100% of their protected areas, where there are others, which I won't mention, but haven't done any. So it's very varied across the region, and please feel free to look at it. I won't read out each of the countries, but you can look across the countries and territories. It includes the territories, and see the level of assessments that have occurred. But I guess the key point here is that it does vary a great deal across the countries and territories of the region. And overall, there is a relatively low level of assessments that have occurred, a quarter of protected areas in the region, based on the review that we did. In terms of the methodologies, and Claire touched on this as well, the most common forms or the most widespread methodologies used, or tools that are used, are either RAMPAM or MET. You can see in this graph that actually MET PNG has the most assessments, and they're one of the countries, of course, that have assessed all of their protected areas with PAMA. And then you can see, to a lesser extent, there are some country-based tools. There's the Micronesia tool. There's also the World Heritage Outlook tool as well. So moving on, Just a couple of points of conclusion, I guess, from this work and from the chapter. I hope this stimulates some discussion today, some thought. I guess through this process, one of the major things that we learned was that it is really difficult to obtain accurate PAMA data. There's not one place where this exists. There's a lot of it. There's some on Wdpa, but there's also a lot which is held at the country level, but also at the organizational level. As you know, there's a lot of project work that gets done, and as part of these projects, people are doing these assessments, but that data and information is not necessarily shared more broadly. I'd also say that it's really difficult to obtain the results of these assessments. So even though you can identify a site that might have had it 5 years ago, obtaining the actual assessment results, which will allow, I guess, a broader analysis is really difficult. And to me, that shows the need for us in the region to support the data collection through SPREP to Wdpa, because at the moment this data is really being lost. The assessments are being done. It might sit in someone's bottom filing cabinet and be lost. So it's really important that we're able to record this data. The second conclusion was that from the results that we do have, the effectiveness of protected areas in the region is widely. This won't be a surprise, but the effectiveness level greatly varies across and within countries. As I said earlier, the next one is a relatively low number of assessments conducted. I tried to do a little bit of research about how this compares to other regions in the world, and I'm sure Claire would be better placed to discuss this, but to me it seems quite low, only a quarter of the protected areas assessed. The next point is really interesting. So as part of the review, what we found was that only 50% of the sites assessed with PAMA are registered on the Wdpa, which means, as if you recall, yesterday Claire mentioned that Wdpa can only include sites that are registered on the Wdpa. So it's not just a case, I think, of focusing on getting the assessments on Wdpa, but also we have to make sure that the Wdpa data is up to date. So then that feeds to the Wdpa. Yeah, and as I said earlier, it demonstrates that as a region, further effort is needed in this area. So thank you. If you've got any questions, I think we're going to a Q&A session now that Vi is going to facilitate. So if you've got any questions about this, please feel free to share them, and we'll try our best to answer it. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for the great presentation and giving us an overview of the results, the PAMI-related results for the region as part of the undertaking for the SOPACA report. Yeah, so moving on to our next session, which is our Q&A session, probably the best session of today, I would think. Well, we can hear from you on your views and any clarifications that you may have regarding the presentations from this morning session. Referring to our list right now, we do have a couple of questions and going right into it. The first one is, do the sites on the World Database for Oecms or other effective area-based conservation measures contribute towards the global goals? Or is it just the Wdpa sites, since these are the truer protected areas as per international definitions? And I would direct this question to Claire. Claire, are you okay to answer this question, please?
Yes, no problem. So the short answer is yes, the data from WD Oecm do contribute to the global goals. the targets, the international targets, IHE target 11 lumps protected areas and OECMs together. So it says that 17%, 10% are conserved through effectively and equitably managed, ecologically representative and well-connected systems of protected areas and OECMs, and integrated into the wider landscapes and seascapes. So it specifically says that, yes, both protected areas and OECMs need to be effective, and they both contribute to the goal. Target 2 coming up is still in draft form, but it looks like it will have similar wording, that it will be effective and equitable management of systems of protected areas and OECMs. So as I said yesterday, we currently don't have any assessments in the Wdpa for OECMs, but there is the potential to add that information if and when it becomes available.
Okay, thank you, Claire, for that. And I hope that answers the question raised by our colleagues. The second question is, other than Wdpa, are there other sources of funding we may be able to access to help or assist us continue to improve capacities for protected area data collection and reporting at the national or site levels? And I will hand this question to Paul. Paul, can you provide clarification here, please?
Thanks, Phi. What I would say is that I would suggest that Wdpa, the action component of the grants mechanism within the project, is probably one of the most accessible sources of funding for helping governments and other partners to improve protected area data collection and reporting. The reason for this is that this is one of the major purposes of the project. So we recently had a call for proposals which focused on specifically assessments. So it was called Small Technical Grants Assessments. So what I would say is that if this is something that organizations are wanting to do, then the best possible, I'd suggest that the best possible opportunity of getting funding for that is through the Wdpa project. And we can certainly send some more information about that. It's likely that there's going to be, as I mentioned yesterday, it's likely that there's going to be a medium grant call for proposals, which will be up to 200,000 euros toward the end of the year. And then there are going to be subsequent small technical grant assessments. So that's first. Second, of course, there's other funding sources. You know, one of the issues with I guess protected area management across the globe is that there isn't a great deal of funding available, but from within this region, the other grant program that I'm aware of is the Kiwa initiative. They've also got a small grant mechanism as well. That one's more so focused on nature-based solutions. So the details and guidelines around that grant program are currently being developed. It's going to be managed out of the IUCN Oceania office here. That might be also an opportunity for funding as well. Beyond that, I'm not sure, but I'm sure there might be some other grant programs, and from time to time there are those that come up globally as well. So looking for projects in the region, but are managed from a global level from various different sources. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Paul. I think that, yeah, that does give quite a clear picture of the options that are available at this point in time. But I would also just like to add to that, but I think that, you know, there's a lot of projects that are coming into countries right now, specifically also for the Global Environment Facility that deals with biodiversity and may have a protected areas component. So what I would say is that, and I would encourage all of you who do have such projects, either that are in the pipeline at this point or at the concept proposal stage, to try and build in data collection as an activity into your projects to make sure that it's captured there, and so that this it'll be part of the overall package for your national projects. So just something to keep in mind in terms of support and assistance for initiating or supporting any ongoing protected area data collection efforts at the national level. Okay, thank you very much. I don't think we have any further questions at this point in time, but we may come back to our Q&A whiteboard again following the other sessions. But for now, we're going to move on to our breakout groups, our interactive discussion forum, and I will hand it over to Claire just to give an explanation and rundown on how we're going to do this. Thank you.
Thanks, Vi. My video won't turn on. Great. So the next just over half an hour, we will be going into breakout groups on Zoom. So we'll be split into groups of 4. Sorry. And this will really just be a chance for everyone to have a think, have a say, and share ideas and thoughts about the current gaps in the data, and to discuss potential ideas for how to fill the gaps. So as we just saw in our presentations, the Wdpa and the Biopharma RIS have the same data. Vi mentioned that PPAP might have different data on their platform, and we saw that in Paul's report, there were some quite big differences and some quite big gaps in information that were in that report, but not in the global database. So we'll spend the first 10 minutes just to reflect on these 3 presentations and discuss if we've noticed any inconsistencies in the data or gaps that you are aware of for your country or site for about the first 10 minutes. And then the next 25 minutes, we will think of ways forward and how to fill these gaps and the best way to get this data flowing up to the Wdpa level. And it would be really useful for you to think about how or what strategies would work well in your country, in your region, because and your site, even whatever your role is, because the approach might be different depending on where the data is coming from and what the gaps are. And then after that discussion, we'll come back to this main plenary session, and each group will nominate someone to report back about a couple of minutes summary of what was discussed in their group. We have something called a jam board, which will help us record notes that we've taken during these discussions, and either myself, Ben, Vi, or Paul will be in each of the groups to help facilitate and to share the link to those boards. So I hope that makes sense. If there are any questions before we all split up, do say them now. Otherwise, as I said, there will be one of us in each group that can answer questions as well.
Thank you, Claire, for those instructions. I don't think there are any questions, so maybe we can go straight into the breakout groups now. Breakout rooms, sorry.
Great. So you should have a little pop-up on your screen. You can just click join and you'll be moved into the breakout room. looks like I think everyone's back now. Hope everyone managed to have enough time to discuss these questions in detail. We'll now just take a few minutes to go around the groups to let everyone share what was discussed. So just 5 minutes maximum to summarize what was discussed in your group and some of the main takeaways. And I think I was group 1, so we can start off with Nate to report back. I was going to say kindly volunteered, but you were nominated. You weren't a volunteer.
I didn't have much choice in the matter. Hey, good morning, everybody. Yeah, Nate Peterson here out of Brisbane, working for the Nature Conservancy. I know many of you we've sat in workshops together somewhere in the Pacific. Missing you all terribly, stuck here in Brisbane. But this is a great group, good discussions. I'm looking at our notes that our group took, and some of the summaries out of that would highlight that we all acknowledge that there's some gaps in the WDPA, stemming from countries not contributing their data, or perhaps in some cases doing it many years ago. So needing to update that information. Following from gaps in the WDPA, there would be gaps in the Wdpa, even though some reports have been done or some assessments have been done. If they're not connected to the WDPA, then there's going to be a gap, which is a lesson that I've learned from today about perhaps why PNG is, the numbers are sort of out of sync. So I'll follow up on that. And kind of on the follow-up thing, I think we all noted that we need to, workshops like this are good to kind of stimulate and get discussion going and whatnot, but then it kind of falls off the radar. We kind of go back to our day jobs, and oftentimes this gets forgotten. So I suggested, and we discussed the role that the Protected Area Working Group might be able to kind of ramp up their efforts and kind of coordinate as far as chasing country level reps to contribute both to WDPA and to the Protected Area Management Effectiveness System. We all sort of agreed that there was power in illustrating what the WDPA and the PAME provides to the countries. There's a lot of great analysis and kind of value added work that those systems do that the countries can take advantage of if they know about it. And not just knowing about it, but they're kind of learning how that helps them. How does that help them do their job better? How does that make their protected areas better? So summarizing that from our group is that we all acknowledge the gaps in the WDPA and the PAME. Sorry. We need to follow up. We need to have like a regular cycle, whether it's through the Protected Areas Working Group or through SPREP or something, to keep chasing people for the information. And I think everybody, when they see what WDPA and the PAME provides, everyone's going to pretty quickly recognize that it's a really fantastic and robust system that we should all be contributing to, and have some pride in how our countries are represented there in the system. I hope that represents our group well. Thanks for nominating me. And I know who you are. Next time I'm in a group, I'm going to nominate you. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Nate.
Thank you, Nate.
Tomorrow. So great. I think that was a great summary from our group. So we can move on to group 2 if there's a representative who wants to share what they discussed.
Okay, hi everybody. This is what group 2 have discussed today. One of the gaps that we found is a lot of the protected areas have no actual boundaries. There's no physical markings around these boundaries. And also the lack of information being and the types of of ecosystems in the conservation areas. Also, a lot of these protected areas don't have management plans in place. Because these protected areas are done verbally by communities, so the development of management plans are not, haven't been done. Also, one of the gaps we found is coordinating of data across various states, and when different authorities are collecting the data, sometimes the Ministry of Marine Resources collect data on protected areas. A lot of NGOs do collect data on these protected areas, and it's just having a coordinated approach on gathering these data. A lot of us in the Pacific, access to remote islands is quite a challenge, and collecting all these information is also one of the gaps that we found that's noted on here. And some of the solutions that we came up with is working with communities and ensuring that before they declare an area as a managed, as a protected areas, is to assist them in developing a management plan that would include the boundaries, the purpose of the protected areas, and it's just helping these communities come up with their plan. Also, because accessing these islands is a challenge, it's maybe working with other agencies, like with the Ministry of Marine Resources and other government agencies that's conducting work in these remote islands, so that costs are shared. And another solution is developing a guideline for each government on how to submit these data. And I think a lot of countries or government agencies don't know how to share data, and having these guidelines in place will assist them with all these sharing of data. One of the, I think one of the questions that was raised yesterday, like some countries are not sharing, don't want to share, maybe due to sensitivity issues. I think countries do these assessments and it's not really good. They don't want to be blacklisted, so they don't want to share. So if the assessment is really, really good, and I think countries want to share these information onto the website and with other agencies. I think that's all we came up with for today.
Thank you very much. It was quite comprehensive. And yeah, some really great points were raised there. So I think we can move on to group 3.
Thank you, group 3, all for providing your input. So we had some good discussion. The initial reflections, there was a little bit of people had identified some inconsistencies in the where assessments had been performed, but it wasn't necessarily showing in Wdpa or the databases. There's also a little bit of potential confusion about who's providing and collating the data, but there was a good interest in Wdpa and what it was doing. Also identified a few inconsistencies and potential gaps. For example, a few places that needed to perform assessments. There's also a mention of a lack of awareness of the importance of protected areas for nature, sort of on the ground level, as well as some capacity gaps in terms of being having the capacity to perform these assessments and the knowledge. And there was a question about whether there was some training available, as well as some gaps in spatial data capacity. So how Wdpa links to the World Database on Protected Areas, and making sure that all the capacity there is there for that, as well as the links between Wdpa and potentially other data streams. So there's mention of a program to centralize environmental data, and interest in building Wdpa into that. And then finally, we talked about how to fill some of these gaps. So there was, for example, raising awareness within the community about the importance of protected areas and protected area effectiveness. We had an example of where there had been sort of degrading in the quality of a protected area had been noticed over the last 5 years. So raising awareness was quite a big part of that, as well as capacity building for these methodologies and for spatial data. And again, some questions about whether some training might be available in these and what resources were available. My group, if I've missed anything, please feel free to shout out.
Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, Ben. No, it's great to see some of the same themes coming up, and also seeing that every group had their own ideas coming up as well. So we can move on to the last group, group 4. Who's the
thanks,
lucky
Claire.
presenter? Okay.
I've been nominated to by the group, so thank you, group, to report back to the plenary. So we had a really great discussion. We covered off on a whole bunch of different things, but it's a really good discussion. So first of all, in terms of what are the gaps, the first one that the group discussed was that there's a general unawareness of Wdpa, the existence of it, and how to access it. We also noted that that there is clearly there is a difference between what's listed on Wdpa and the SOPACA report, and probably also what is the reality of the assessments that have been conducted. Also noted that that I guess it's something which is dynamic as well. So in the case of Fiji, there are currently a whole bunch of different assessments that are currently happening. So it's not just a static thing, but PAMA, the assessments of protected areas using PAMAs is an ongoing process, and there's new data that becomes available all the time. In terms of issues, we highlighted or discussed a whole range of issues which are related to the data gap, which are causing the data gap. The first one was the first issue was around the capacity of communities to conduct these assessments, but then also the ability to interpret and feedback, use the data or the results of the assessments to improve management. There was we discussed the issue of customary or community managed protected areas a lot, and the issues around those in terms of, as I said, in terms of how they can use these tools, whether these tools are relevant, are adapted, all of that sort of thing. Yep, so in the case of the other issues that we raised, these are all very similar to the previous groups. The other issues that we raised was the interface of the database. Wdpa is a little bit difficult to access. It needs improving. There is a disconnect sometimes between the site level and national level. So even if the assessments are done at the site level, this information might be submitted to the national level, but then this may not be be going on to other places or feeding back to the community. So that's just some of the issues that we discussed. In terms of solutions, the solutions that we thought, that we discussed, could address these issues was more training is needed, the need for simple and easy to use tools that are adapted to a small island context. And what this would do is encourage greater, I guess, more PAMA assessments being conducted. And the last one was about clearer data flows. So this is also one of the issues that we discussed. It wasn't, people are not particularly or are not aware about who's responsible for submitting this data and where the data goes. So clearer data flows would be helpful. So thanks again, team, for the really great discussion. With that, I'll hand back to you, Claire.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, I just wanted to say that you left it on a very good point about the data flows, because that's what we will be discussing more tomorrow. Maximizing data flows from the site level up. So you can have a think about that throughout the day, and we'll come back to discuss it tomorrow a bit more. So thanks everyone for participating. It looks like that was quite successful in getting everyone's ideas and getting some discussions generated. So thanks everyone for participating. And I think I'll hand over to Vi now for some just some closing remarks. Unless there's any questions, feel free to keep putting them in the chat if they come up.
Thank you, Claire, and thank you everybody for participating in the breakout groups and for sharing your insights, experiences, and your thoughts on innovative, on the challenges and issues that we face, and also the innovative solutions and approaches that you also put forth for our information. I think a lot of what we captured today has given the UNEP WCMC team and also us here at SPREP and IUCN a greater appreciation of the common issues that we face with data collection, and also some of the ways in which we can move forward or work around or work with these circumstances. So I think it's been the input's been quite great, and will also go a long way in helping us to design this workflow for the region to better capture PAMI data across all of the countries. Again, I'd like to remind everybody, please, if you could fill in your details on the participant list on the Google Doc. The link was provided earlier in the chat. If you are having problems, please do let us know if you can't access it, and we will help you out with that. And before we close off today's session, I believe we do have a few more questions that I had overlooked earlier during the Q&A, so we'll get to those right now. I think one of the questions there was related to the PAMI summary stats, and so it's really asking why are the PAMI summary stats on Paul's slide different from what was showed in the UNEP WCMC presentation earlier in the day? Noting that Paul's slide shows 100% for PNG, but Claire's was quite a bit lower. And I'll direct that question to both Paul and Claire, if you can provide some clarification here. You can decide amongst yourself who will answer first. Thank you.
I can have a go first. Thanks, Vi. The answer to that is that the scope of the SOPACA report, or the methodology that we use to pull together this information, is broader than what is used by Wdpa. So we basically did a desktop review and included all of the assessments that we could find. So people did not need to submit them to us. We basically compiled them all, and that's why we're able to include the PNG data, because, for example, Fiona was an author on the chapter. She knows of those assessments. She conducted those assessments. So that's the main reason. Claire? Anything to add?
Yes, we discussed this a bit in our group as well. That is the main reason. Also, you mentioned that you included sites that weren't in the WDPA. So there's also a disconnect there. So some of that data was for sites that weren't in the WDPA, which are then missing from the GDPA. It would be great to follow up with those data sources that you had that are missing in the GDPA and see if we can get them in eventually as well.
Okay, thank you, Paul and Claire. I hope that clarifies and answers this query. The next one was, how did all the management plans or the PAMI assessments, how did these get onto the global biopharma reference information system? Who uploaded them, or did they come directly from the protected areas or through SPREP? I guess I would attempt to answer this because I know that Bastian, our colleague in Italy, has retired for the evening. So if I'm correct, a lot of these assessments are based on what is actually in the GDPA right now. So the links, the current links for countries to reports that are publicly available would be those that have been sourced and displayed during the Global Biopharma Information System demo that Bastian carried out earlier today. Similarly, for the PPAP at the moment, we are automatically integrated with the WDPA and also the GDPA. But to a very limited extent, we will be developing these features further in the coming months so that we can, and also integrating the protected area management effectiveness module that was or elements of it that are relevant for our region into the Pacific Islands Protected Area portal, hopefully by the end of this year. Again, yeah, so it's really just linking to what existing information is already on the GDPA. That's my understanding. Claire, did you want to add any points to that?
I just wanted to maybe clarify the question. No, I think you're very correct, but this was looking more at the management plans, which aren't in the GDPA. Bastian had pulled up the page, the last of the 4 was of the management plans and the other reports and references, resources, I think it was called, that are on the RIS, but not on Protected Planet. So I don't know if you know the answer to this, and maybe we should follow up with Bastian and answer tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, it may be that these are probably sourced from other, maybe from countries themselves. I don't know. Although it's highly unlikely. However, it would be good to seek some clarification from Bastian on this. And we will provide shed some light on this in tomorrow's session, hopefully. Okay, we still have some other. Okay, the last question that we have here is key biodiversity assessments have also been categorized as PAMI assessments. Is this accurate? And how are these assessments, or how do these assessments contribute to determining a specific site's management effectiveness? Claire, would you like to have a go at that? This question, please.
Yes, so I was just a bit unclear about KBA assessments, because I don't think those are in the GDPA. We have IBAs.
Okay. Oh, well,
but I don't know if that's...
Since you do have IBAs listed or captured in the GDPA, can you, I mean, would the second part of the question still be valid, or?
Yeah, because in Paul's presentation, he mentioned that the BirdLife IBA for their report didn't meet the criteria, so it wasn't included, and we do have them in the GDPA. I personally agree with Paul that they don't really assess effectiveness in the same way that these other tools do, but they've been in the GDPA since its creation. But I think that as we're going forward into the new decade, it would be a really useful exercise to go through all these 70 methodologies that we do have in the database and just ensure that they do align with the definition of a PAME assessment, and then only retain those that do. And in the case of the BirdLife IBA, it may be that we remove them if we come to the consensus that they don't meet that. For now, they're in there because they've always been in there, which isn't a great reason. I don't know the rationale behind adding them in the first place. So that needs to be investigated a bit more. Yes.
Thank you, Claire. And I think it would be very, very useful information to provide that clarity around what role they sort of, or any added value that they contribute to the global database. Okay, I think that brings us to the end of today's session, and again, I'd like to extend a heartfelt thanks to all of you who have been able to connect with us this morning or this evening, based on wherever you are joining us from. I think we've had some very good discussions, and we had some very informative presentations and demonstrations of online informational platforms earlier in the day. So yeah, tomorrow we'll be starting on the dot again at 9:30. So we hope that you can join us then, so that we can continue our journey and look at the next steps and way forward that would benefit all of us, and that would work for all of us to ensure a smooth flow of data collection around the PAMI information for each country. Apart from that, I have nothing else to add. So thank you very much to you all, and we'll see you all again tomorrow. Just one last point, please, if you can all just spend a couple of minutes, or even just to fill in your details on your attendance list, participants list. As I mentioned earlier, the link is in the chat. And if you all enjoyed today's session, if you could just reach down in the right-hand corner of your Zoom in the reactions function and just give us a thumbs up, that would be very much appreciated, and will help give the team a very good rest of the day with the work that we have before us. So thank you very much, and all the best, and we'll see you again tomorrow. Thank you.